Hi, my name is Tim Cook, and I'm happy to have you on board this training program on business planning in Mediterranean marine protected areas. This training is a core module of MedPAN's regular training program catalog. The overall objective of the training is to provide MPA managers and financial officers with skills to autonomously develop a business plan in line with their MPA objectives. This training was developed by MedPAN and the Brijuni National Park with the support of BlueSeeds. This course combines a series of online tutorials for self-learning with working sessions with trainers to help MPAs in developing their business plan. So, what are the threats to biodiversity in the Mediterranean Sea? Well, depending on the region of the world, the relative contribution of the different stressors on species threatened with extinction can be different. Due to their historical legacy, Mediterranean countries host over 500 million people with populations concentrated near the coast, and the Mediterranean is the first world tourist destination, attracting over 350 million international tourists every year. The Mediterranean Sea also represents a third of global maritime traffic and is home to a booming exploitation of hydrocarbons. As a result, in the Mediterranean, the four most important stressors on species threatened with extinction are overfishing, amounting to nearly half of all threats, followed by habitat destruction, pollution, and invasive species. The Mediterranean is the most overfished sea in the world, with approximately 90% of its fish stocks overfished. So, what can we do to mitigate these threats to Mediterranean biodiversity? Well, marine protected areas, or MPAs, have been recognized unanimously by scientists as an essential part of marine conservation. They represent today keystones of biodiversity conservation while contributing at the same time to people's livelihoods. Here is the IUCN's definition of a protected area. A protected area is a clearly defined geographical space recognized, dedicated, and managed through legal or other effective means to achieve the long-term conservation of nature with associated ecosystem services and cultural values. And as these two pigeons are saying, you might know other names, but they refer to the same thing. MPA can be a national park, a nature reserve, a landscape park, a specially protected area of Mediterranean importance, a marine Natura 2000 site, or other designations. Beyond biodiversity conservation, effectively managed and well-enforced MPAs can generate substantial socioeconomic benefits for small-scale fisheries, tourism, or local businesses, and ultimately benefit local communities. A famous example of this is how MPAs benefit fisheries. It is called the spillover effect and is illustrated here on the left, where a MPA has a spillover of resources, typically fish, which increase in size and numbers inside the MPA thanks to the protection offered by the MPA, and are recruited outside the protected area where they are harvested by fishermen. The question of how much and what kind of protection we actually need is under debate. However, the Nagoya 2010 Convention on Biological Diversity produced the strategic plan for biodiversity for the year 2020. And the Aichi Biodiversity Target 11 of this plan states that at least 10% of coastal and marine areas, especially areas of particular importance for biodiversity and ecosystem services, are conserved through effectively and equitably managed, ecologically representative and well-connected systems of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures and integrated into the wider landscapes and seascapes. In the Mediterranean, there are additional legal measures like the Specially Protected Areas and Biological Diversity Protocol adopted at the 1995 Barcelona Convention for the Protection of the Marine Environment and Coastal Region of the Mediterranean. Through this protocol, the contracting parties established the list of specially protected areas of Mediterranean importance in order to promote the protection of threatened species and their habitats. And finally, there are other specific specific measures like the Natura 2000 network, which constitutes a network of protected areas specific to waters of countries of the European Union. So what is the situation in the Mediterranean Sea? In the Mediterranean, the number of MPAs has been increasing gradually over the second half of the 20th century, particularly since the 1990s. This sudden increase here in 1999 in total surface area covered by MPAs corresponds to the founding of the very large Pelagos sanctuary in the French, Monacan, and Italian waters. This map reviews the current coverage of MPAs in the Mediterranean Sea. MPAs of national statute, marine Natura 2000 sites, and the Pelagos sanctuary cover together 8.3% of the basin. Although this is close to the ice sheet target 11 of a 10% coverage, you can notice by taking a close look to the map that the situation across the sea is highly contrasted, since over 97% of MPAs are located in EU waters, where they mainly cover coastal and shallow waters. The Pelagos sanctuary, situated here, and the cetacean migration corridor here account together for more than half of a total MPA coverage. Highly protected areas, which include no-go, no-take, and no-fish zones, amount to a coverage of only 0.06% of the Mediterranean, which is small considering how essential these areas are to fish recovery and biodiversity conservation. Finally, it is worth mentioning that international negotiations for post-2020 global biodiversity framework are pushing for a 30% global coverage by MPAs of marine waters. This means that more effort will have to be made in the coming years by Mediterranean countries to implement international objectives. Apart from MPA coverage and ecological coherence, the ISHE Target 11 also calls for effectively and equitably managed systems of MPAs. Management effectiveness of a MPA is commonly defined as the degree to which management actions are achieving the goals and objectives of the MPA or MPA network. This makes sense because if conservation objectives are not being reached, the MPA has poor effectiveness. Results from a 2015 MedPAN survey showed that conditions in Mediterranean MPAs for effective management were sometimes unfavorable, as shown by the important proportion of MPAs still without an implemented management plan, an adequate monitoring and evaluation system, an adequate patrolling system, or adequate equipment. Unsurprisingly, two factors have been recognized to have a strong impact on MPA effectiveness globally: staff and budget. In this survey, almost half of the MPAs had no dedicated staff or an inadequate staff number, while an additional 44% had a staff number below optimum level. Only 10% of MPAs had an adequate staff number. The survey also revealed that over half of Mediterranean MPAs had no budget or inadequate budget, while an additional 42% had a budget that could be improved. Only 5% of MPAs actually had a sufficient budget. So what is the budget deficit of marine conservation in the Mediterranean? In 2015, Vertigo Lab, with the support of MedPAN, SPARAC, and WWF, published a report on the financial analysis of Mediterranean MPAs. They sampled data from 20 managed MPAs from 17 countries through interviews with national authorities and showed that the total resources available for MPAs in 2015 amounted to only 53 million euros per year. Unfortunately, this represents only 8% of what is necessary to reach the IHE target of 10% of marine protected areas in 2020. Resources for reaching this target include the combined costs of effective management of existing MPAs and the costs for MPAs that still need to be created. The financing gap of MPAs in the Mediterranean for reaching the IHE targets can therefore be calculated at a total of 700 million euros per year, a gap that will increase with a new target of 30% MPA coverage. It is therefore no surprise that the strategic objective number 4 of the 2020 roadmap for Mediterranean MPAs is to increase the allocation of financial resources to establish and maintain an ecological network of effectively managed MPAs. This roadmap is an extensive participatory process coordinated by MedPAN, SPARAC, and other Mediterranean partners to define the steps to be taken by MPAs to achieve their objectives. The purpose of this training program is to help MPA managers develop financial sustainability. This training uses a step-by-step approach, starting with another video, video 2, explaining how to build a business plan for MPA using a business planning tool, the MedPAN tool. The main objective is to learn how to calculate a MPA's financing gap. This is followed by a third video explaining how to reduce costs and optimize revenues in order to reduce or eliminate the identified financing gap. If this is not sufficient to close the gap, a MPA can explore if it can develop new financing mechanisms, as explained in video 4. Finally, if new financing mechanisms are advisable, video 5 gives examples of self-financing mechanisms that can be implemented by a MPA in order to fill its financing gap. In conclusion, proper funding is key to MPA effectiveness. However, we've seen that Mediterranean MPAs are underfunded and that their financing gap must be calculated for each MPA before it can be addressed. In the next video, we will see how to calculate this financing gap for your MPA. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon.